I operated an Airbnb mountain cabin for 5 years, nestled in a secluded wooded area about 30 minutes from the nearest town. The property had been my grandfather's hunting retreat, and after inheriting it, I decided to renovate it and turn it into a vacation rental. The isolation was part of its charm. Apparently, isolated getaways are the new thing to do nowadays. Managing the cabin remotely had its challenges, but the income was good enough to justify the effort, as I wouldn't classify myself as a high earner overall. Over time, I had established an efficient system. Professional cleaners maintained the property between guests, and I had installed smart locks and security cameras covering the exterior. I rarely needed to visit during a guest stay. The booking that changed everything came during the off-season, mid-November, when the forest was barren and the first snows threatened. A woman named Rebecca reserved the cabin for 3 nights. In the comments section, she mentioned that she was a writer seeking solitude to finish her novel. The booking looked normal. Her profile had several positive reviews from other hosts, and her ID verification was complete. There were no red flags at all. I didn't have any reason to be concerned. 2 days into her stay, Rebecca messaged me about the heating system not working properly. The temperature had dropped significantly overnight, and she reported the cabin was freezing. I apologized and offered to send a repair technician, but she insisted it wasn't urgent enough to disturb her writing flow with a visitor. Instead, she asked if I could guide her through troubleshooting the furnace over the phone. I was hesitant. The furnace was in the basement and could be complicated for someone unfamiliar with heating systems. And to be honest, Rebecca didn't sound like someone who likes to get her hands dirty. We tried for a few minutes, but it was simply impossible to figure out what was wrong over the phone. Eventually, I gave up and told her that I would be coming over myself. It was already late afternoon, around 4:30, and I knew darkness would fall before I arrived. During the drive, I let the call with Rebecca go through my head, and I realized some things I hadn't picked up on during the call. Rebecca had mentioned specific details about the furnace and its location that weren't included in the house manual. Perhaps she had simply explored the basement, but it struck me as odd. I dismissed the thought, attributing it to my general wariness of the property's isolation. When I pulled into the long driveway, the first unusual detail was the presence of 2 vehicles, a silver SUV and a black pickup truck. Rebecca had mentioned nothing about having companions. Technically, this wasn't allowed, but I didn't really care about those things. However, what threw me off was that the cabin's exterior lights were off despite the growing darkness, which contradicted the automatic timer settings. I approached cautiously, noticing movement through the kitchen window. Multiple silhouettes passing back and forth. I texted Rebecca that I had arrived, and she responded immediately, asking me to come in through the basement entrance since she was working upstairs and didn't want to break concentration. This request immediately heightened my suspicions. The basement entrance was rarely used, partially concealed behind a stand of pine trees, and not mentioned in any of the rental information. How would she know about it? I decided to walk around the perimeter first, staying in the shadows of the trees. As I circled to the back of the cabin, I noticed the security cameras had been repositioned, now pointed at the sky rather than the entrances. This was deliberately done, not the work of weather or animals. My unease intensified into genuine alarm. Instead of approaching the house, I retreated to my car and called Rebecca, claiming I was running late due to a fallen tree blocking the road. I wanted to gauge her reaction. She sounded irritated, saying they were freezing and needed help urgently. The casual use of "they" confirmed she wasn't alone as her booking had indicated. I drove back down the driveway, stopping just out of sight of the cabin, and called the local sheriff's department. The dispatcher agreed to send a deputy to perform a welfare check based on the tampered security cameras. While waiting, I accessed the smart lock history on my phone and discovered the basement door had been opened repeatedly throughout the day, at least 15 times. This made no sense for a single guest, let alone for someone claiming to be writing all day. Something was being moved in or out of the basement. 40 minutes later, the deputy arrived, and we approached the cabin together. When we knocked at the front door, a woman matching Rebecca's profile picture answered, appearing surprised by the officer's presence. She claimed everything was fine, just cold, and invited us inside to check the furnace. But while she was talking, I noticed how she was blinking excessively. It felt like she was trying to convey a message to us. The deputy must have noticed it as well and asked if anyone else was present. She hesitated for a while before admitting her boyfriend had joined her. As we entered, I immediately noticed several pieces of expensive equipment stacked near the door. My mounted television, sound system, and even artwork removed from the walls. I was stunned and didn't grasp what in the world was going on. The deputy asked Rebecca where this boyfriend was, and without talking, she pointed to the back bedroom. He walked up to the door and called out loud and firmly for the person to present himself. After a brief moment, the boyfriend, a man at least 10 years older than Rebecca in dirty clothes and a thick beard, emerged from the bedroom, demanding to know what was happening. When the deputy questioned him about the items by the door, he started rambling off about rearranging things. The whole situation felt completely off. Both the so-called boyfriend and Rebecca were instructed to sit down at the dining room table while we waited for additional officers. About 30 seconds after doing so, the boyfriend jumped up and made a sudden move toward the kitchen. While I just stood there frozen in my stance, the deputy intercepted him, discovering he was reaching for a concealed handgun in his jacket draped over one of the chairs. The man was put in handcuffs, and luckily a few minutes later the requested backup vehicle with an additional 2 officers arrived. The officers proceeded to thoroughly search the cabin. Doing so, they discovered a third person hiding in the basement. It turned out to be a man with a criminal record who had been moving items from the cabin to the pickup truck throughout the day. Further investigation revealed that Rebecca had been surprised by the 2 men knocking on the door a few hours ago. They had threatened and instructed her to call me in order to lure me to the cabin, assumingly to rob me. The part that I don't understand is why Rebecca had first tried to fix the heating system over the phone. Maybe she had tried to protect me, but I never got around to talk to her about that. The most disturbing discovery came when officers searched their vehicles, finding zip ties, a crowbar, knives, and detailed notes about other Airbnbs they had, or were planning to target, complete with personal information they had somehow obtained. My name was on their list, along with my home address and banking institution. I learned they had been watching the cabin for days before Rebecca's arrival, learning the routines of the cleaning staff and studying the property's layout. My best guess was that they had planned to hold me overnight, potentially force banking transfers, and then leave me and Rebecca bound in the basement while they cleared out the cabin. At least that's what I made up in my mind. The 2 men were charged with multiple felonies including conspiracy, attempted armed robbery, possession of stolen property. The investigation connected them to similar incidents across different states. After this experience, I immediately suspended all future bookings for the next 3 months. I gave Rebecca a full refund and apologized for what she had gone through, even though it wasn't really my fault. She sent a thank you in a short email, and that was it. I never heard anything again from her. I do believe the experience left her heavily traumatized, and hope she got the help she needs. After the 3 months were up, I blocked it for another 3, before giving up completely and selling the cabin. I couldn't bring myself to return to it, knowing how close I had come to danger, and how differently things might have ended if I hadn't alerted the authorities and blindly followed Rebecca's instructions to enter through the basement alone. The money from Airbnb had been good, but no amount of income was worth the risk of what could have potentially happened to me that night. Sometimes the isolation that makes these properties so appealing to guests is the very thing that makes them perfect targets for those with malicious intent. A few years ago as a student, I got into the habit of going on solo weekend getaway study retreats. I often felt cluttered up in my city student apartment with my 3 other roommates, and these getaways helped me loosen up and focus on the subjects for the upcoming exams. It was a Friday, and I had been driving for nearly 2 hours when I finally pulled into the parking lot of my Airbnb in a small coastal town. The listing had promised ocean views and a quiet neighborhood, perfect for a weekend full of scientific articles and my laptop. 2 days here, far away from the distraction of my usual life, seemed ideal. The complex was larger than I expected, with at least 20 units spread across 3 buildings. Mine was in the far corner of the property, Unit 17B. As I parked, I noticed how quiet the place was. No lights shone from any windows, no sounds of televisions or conversations drifted through the evening air. I grabbed my laptop bag and 1 suitcase, figuring I'd come back for the rest after I got settled. The key was in a lockbox, as promised, and I let myself in. The apartment was clean but minimalistic furnished. Just a couch, coffee table, small dining set, and the basics in the kitchen. The bedroom had a queen bed with plain white linens. It wasn't luxurious, but it would do. After all, I'd be lying if I hadn't chosen the place mainly due to the price. After bringing in the rest of my luggage, I went to explore the property a bit. The listing had mentioned a path to the beach, and I wanted to see the ocean before it got completely dark. As I walked the grounds, I realized that not a single other unit appeared occupied. No cars in the lot except mine, no lights, no signs of life whatsoever. When I reached what should have been the beach access, I found it blocked by a chain-link fence with a no trespassing sign. Beyond it, I could see construction equipment and piles of debris. The promised ocean view was obstructed by a half-built structure. I checked the listing again on my phone and saw nothing about ongoing construction. Disappointed but too tired to care much, I headed back to my unit. Along the way, I noticed a middle-aged man watching me from the doorway of the building across from mine. He nodded as we made eye contact, and I nodded back, relieved to see at least one other person around. Back inside, I locked the door and started unpacking. The silence of the place was unsettling, but I reminded myself that solitude was exactly what I had come for. I made a simple dinner from groceries I'd picked up on the drive and settled in with my laptop. Around 11, there was a loud knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the property manager hadn't mentioned they'd be stopping by. As a petite young woman, I knew better than to open the door to anyone, and instead approached cautiously and called out, asking who it was. A woman's voice responded that she was from property management and needed to check something with the water pipes due to issues in the complex. I asked why this affected my apartment, and she explained that several units had reported problems, and they were checking all units to prevent damage. Something felt off. Why would they be doing maintenance checks so late? And if other units had reported problems, that meant other people were staying here. Yet I'd seen no evidence of that. I asked if she had identification. The woman claimed she'd left her ID in the car, but assured me she worked for the management company. She said it would only take a minute, and she'd appreciate it if I could let her in now, so she wouldn't have to come back. I remembered the empty parking lot. There had been no other cars when I arrived, and I hadn't heard any pull-up since. I decided to call the property manager using the number from my booking confirmation. I told her to hold on for a moment as I stepped away from the door to make the call. While doing so, I heard hushed voices outside. The listing owner didn't answer, but as the phone rang, I noticed movement through the kitchen window. Two shadowy figures were circling around to the back of the unit. My heart racing, this felt wrong on so many levels. I quickly turned off all the lights and moved to the bedroom, locking that door as well. The property manager's voicemail picked up, and I left a panicked message before calling 911. I explained my situation to the dispatcher in a whisper, that I was alone in what appeared to be an otherwise empty apartment complex, and people were trying to get in under false pretenses. While on the phone, I heard a scraping sound at the back door, then the distinct sound of glass breaking and footsteps inside the apartment. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to find a secure place to hide. I locked myself in the bedroom and wedged myself into the closet of the bedroom, pushing clothes and my empty suitcase in front of me. From my hiding spot, I could hear them enter through the back. At least 3 different voices, 2 men and the woman from the door, discussed where to look first. I could hear them scattering through the place and items hitting the floor. Once they reached the bedroom and the doorknob began to rattle, I held my breath, praying that they would leave me alone. Instead, the rattling turned into something heavy hitting against the door. The bedroom door splintered open, and judging from the footsteps, 2 people entered and began ransacking the room. I heard them gather my laptop and go through my backpack before retreating from the bedroom. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I stared at the closed door from the inside and prepared to kick for my life once it opened. But for whatever reason, it never happened. Just as they were preparing to leave, I heard sirens approaching. The intruders cursed and rushed out, leaving the doors open behind them. The police arrived moments later, finding me still huddled in the closet, clearly in shock. Once I was convinced that I was safe, I gave my statement, explaining everything that happened as well as I could remember. The officers explained that this wasn't the first time this complex had been targeted. The property had changed ownership recently, and most units were vacant during the transition. A gang had been systematically robbing the occupied units because there weren't many people around to intercept and report it. The officer also informed me that the real property manager had reported suspicious activity several times. He had been handed the recommendation to remove the place from Airbnb for the time being, but that never happened. I spent the night in a hotel after giving my statement and contacted Airbnb the next day. They refunded my stay plus provided credit for the hotel. The next day, I drove back to the city. A few days later, the police informed me that they had arrested 2 men they believed to be in the apartment with me that day. I never heard what happened to them, and never saw my stolen belongings again either. This experience left me truly traumatized. I've become much more cautious about where I book now. I always check recent reviews and research the neighborhood thoroughly. I make sure to investigate occupancy rates and security measures. On a side note, after taking some time off to recover from the incident, I ended up completing my studies and am since working in a management position. My name is Adam, and I'm a 28-year-old digital marketing graduate. A few months ago, I landed an interview with a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago that could finally launch my career in the direction I'd been working and studying toward for years. The only problem was the short notice, just a few days to prepare and book accommodations. Hotels in the downtown area were absurdly expensive, especially for what might be a 5-day stay if I advanced to the second round of interviews. After realizing that hotels were a no-go, I resorted to Airbnb. I found a stylish loft apartment just 3 blocks from the company's headquarters. The photos showed an open concept space with exposed brick walls, large windows, and modern furnishings. At half the price of nearby hotels, it seemed like the perfect solution and the best setting to nail the interview. I proceeded to book the place. It was seamless. The host, a man named James, responded quickly to my inquiry and provided detailed check-in instructions. He explained that he traveled frequently for work and rented his place while away. The building had a doorman and a secure entry system, so I didn't have to worry about any security-related issues I might have. I arrived in Chicago on a busy Tuesday afternoon. Upon arriving at the building, the doorman checked my ID against the guest list James had provided and directed me to the 11th floor. The apartment was exactly as pictured: spacious, clean, and with an impressive view of the city skyline. I unpacked, steamed my interview outfit, and spent the evening researching the company and preparing answers to potential questions. After falling asleep sometime after 10, I woke up refreshed, made coffee in the well-equipped kitchen, and headed out for a practice walk to the interview location. The neighborhood was bustling with professionals hurrying to work, and I felt a surge of excitement about potentially joining their ranks soon. After timing my walk, which by the way was exactly 12 minutes, I spent the day exploring nearby shops and cafes. I returned to the apartment in the early evening, ordered takeout, and continued my interview preparations. Around 9, I decided to shower and turn in early to ensure I was well rested for the big next day. As I was drying my hair, I heard a notification sound from my phone. It was an email from Airbnb confirming a change to my reservation. Confused, I opened it immediately. According to the email, my host had modified my checkout date from Sunday to Thursday, tomorrow, meaning I would have nowhere to stay after my interview. I immediately messaged James through the app, explaining that I might need to stay through the weekend if selected for a second interview. His response came quickly. "I never changed your reservation. I'm still out of town until Monday." A chill ran through me. If the host hadn't changed the reservation, who had access to his account? I called Airbnb support and was put on hold. While waiting, I heard a sound from the front of the apartment, the distinct electronic beep of the keypad lock being activated. The first thing I thought of was the cleaning lady. But why would they come by at this time? Combined with the notification I had just received, I got a weird feeling. I heard the door open and footsteps entering the apartment. Something didn't feel right. My heart began racing. I looked around frantically. The bathroom had a lock, but it was flimsy. The bedroom didn't lock at all. I grabbed my phone, wallet, and room key, then slipped onto the fire escape through the bedroom window, pulling it mostly closed behind me. From my position on the fire escape, I could see into the living room. A man entered wearing a mask, dressed completely in black and holding a gun in his hand. He proceeded checking all the rooms, searching for anything of value. When he entered the bedroom, I held my breath, pressing myself against the brick wall. He approached the window, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he'd seen me. Instead, he pulled the curtains closed, blocking my view inside and concealing me from anyone looking out. After what was probably 5 minutes at max, but felt like 3 hours, I heard sirens approaching. I suddenly heard the front door slamming closed, indicating that the man must have left. I waited another minute before climbing back through the window into the apartment. The place looked no different than before the incident. Everything was as I left it. While I was going through everything, I heard a knock on the door, followed by the police announcing themselves. After looking through the peephole and convincing myself that it was really the police, I opened up. The police took me outside, where I found the doorman obviously distressed sitting on the floor and another officer standing by him. 2 of the officers proceeded to enter and search the apartment before filling me in. Apparently, the suspect approached the doorman asking for directions. After getting close enough to him, he pulled out his gun and threatened him to the point where he revealed the combination for the apartment. Once the man entered my apartment, the doorman managed to activate the emergency button under his desk, which triggered the police response. It was clear that the intruder was looking for valuables, such as phones, money, or anything like that. Luckily, I took it all with me when I hid on the fire escape. I don't know what he would have done if I had found me out there, but those are thoughts I try not to think about too much. While the police were still present, I received a call from James, who was alarmed by the situation. He confirmed he'd been in Seattle for a conference all week and had not changed my reservation. The officers recommended I find alternative accommodation, so I booked a hotel for the remaining nights. Before leaving, one of the officers helped me collect digital evidence, screenshots of the changed reservation, messages with James, and the original booking confirmation. At the hotel, I finally reached Airbnb's security team. They took the incident seriously, suspended the listing pending investigation, and offered to cover my hotel expenses. They explained that sometimes hosts' accounts get compromised, or in rare cases, properties are listed by people who don't actually own them. Despite the disturbance, I managed to get enough sleep to perform well in my interview the following day. The company was impressed and invited me to a second round on Friday. I didn't share my ordeal with them. I didn't want to seem unstable or bring negative energy to the interview. Unfortunately, I ultimately wasn't offered the job, but I don't want to blame it on what happened prior. 2 weeks later, I received an update from Airbnb's investigation team. They discovered that James's account had indeed been hacked, and the intruder had been using the account to monitor reservations. To this day, I cannot explain as to why he changed my reservation, as it had absolutely no influence as to what he was planning to do. If anything, it made me aware that something strange was happening. The only explanation I can come up with is that he fat-fingered it on his phone. I've since found another job which I consider to be my dream job, but that experience changed how I travel. I no longer stay in Airbnbs, and even deleted the app from my phone. When friends ask why I prefer hotels despite the higher cost, I usually give a vague answer about preferring the amenities. The full story is too unnerving to casually share. I am fully aware that this is not a common thing that happens in Airbnbs, but it has ruined the experience for me, and I don't see myself recovering from it anytime soon.